And here we are again, live from beautiful downtown planet Earth, the garden spot of the galaxy, with your hosts,
Nor Kyle and
Mushtaq Ali, bringing you wit, wisdom, and hopefully a good joke or two. So tonight we are going to do part 2 of the No Secret. And we should refresh your memory for part 1 of the No Secret. And this has to do with what I call the Law of Due Diligence, which states that if you want the universe to help you do something, you have to do your due diligence first and do all of the things that you need to do before you can expect any sort of divine help. This is different than the law of attraction. The law of attraction says that if you sit there and think of a tuna sandwich long enough, one will fly into your mouth. And this is not that. This is the, oh, I need to go to the store and get some tuna sort of thing. So, the importance of the law of due diligence is that you have to break the inertia yourself. Y'all know what the law of inertia states, right? One of Newton's laws of motion. Very simple law. Come on, somebody knows it.
I think I've got it. Something which is still tends to stay still. Something which is in motion tends to stay in motion.
Yep, that's it. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. This is why when you push a car, in the beginning, it's hard to push the damn car. Once you get it rolling, it's much, much easier to keep it rolling. Simple example of this law of motion. And manifesting things is the same way. If you want to sit and visualize a tuna salad sandwich flying into your mouth, you have a huge amount of inertia to overcome. And frankly, your thoughts probably don't have enough energy to do it. So, in order to actually manifest something, you have to get behind the damn car and push it. And this looks like asking yourself, what are the things in this thing that I need to do that I can do? And doing those things. This is what breaks the inertia. This is what gets the process in motion. If you just sit there, you're dealing with all of this inertia and it won't move. So, y'all remember the story that I told you about my teacher's teacher, Ali Baba, and the train station?
Yeah.
Yeah. All he could do is get to the train station, but he did that and everything else got taken care of. So this is the same sort of thing. If you want to manifest something, you have to figure out what you can do to manifest it. And then you actually have to do these things. You can't just think about them. You can't want them to happen. You can't decide that you deserve it, therefore it's going to happen. You actually have to do the work. And this is why the law of attraction is so much more popular than the law of due diligence, because the law of attraction does not allow for you having to do the work. According to most people. There's a couple of people who realize the truth of this and will speak to it, but for the most part, I haven't seen that. So, there are some things, and let me I'm going to pull up the image that I used last week. We talked about gratefulness, diligence, and faithfulness, and faith as the three components.
There we are. It just came up.
Okay, so here we have this groovy image. Now, a lot of this comes out of the teachings of Ibn al-Arabi. So he was much smarter than me, according to everybody but me. And so we kind of assume that he might know what he's talking about. So given these three things, the three things that you need to do to work within the law of due diligence, the first part is to be diligent, is to work with great fervor for what you want. The second part is to have faith. After you've done the work, I think we actually did a whole Enneagram of this as well. And I'm not sure where I left that laying around. Once we have gotten to the second shock, that is having faith. And this is important, because this is faith without object. It's not having faith in something. It's just having faith. And the
Trusting the process.
Yeah, just knowing that the process is going to complete itself. Mm-hmm. And the third part is gratitude. And gratitude is this ridiculously important part that tends to be forgotten, which is to be very, very thankful for everything that you have, and to be expressive about that.
Yeah, and as we noticed, it both starts and ends there.
Yep. So for most of this, you go back and you listen to the first talk, but we are going to get to this. This is also out of Ibn al-Arabi's work, or extrapolated from it. And this is the play of the three forces within the Insani Kamil. The Insani Kamil means the completed human being, somebody who has finished themselves. And things are in a different arrangement here because it's a different Enneagram. But these are the three shocks. And the first is knowledge without belief. If you want to be successful in your due diligence, you need to separate your beliefs about things from your actual knowledge of things. Do you understand what I mean by that? Somebody say something, or nod, or some such.
Can you go more into it?
Yes. So, what can I know? I can know that at sea level, water will boil at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, or 100 degrees Celsius. I know this because first I learned it from a reputable source, my science teacher, who would never lie to me. And then we actually went out and tested it. We went down to the Pacific Ocean and got out a pot of water and a heating element, a little camp stove, and we boiled water with a thermometer in it. And lo and behold, it was 212 degrees. It was like a miracle. So, I don't need to have any belief about that. I know that this is the case through two things, two of the three yaqeens, three certainties. There are three kinds of certainty that you can have. There is the certainty of right knowledge, knowledge from reputable teachers who will give you the straight dope. You know, like Newton, for example. You can trust what Newton says in most things because he's got the math to back it up. So you don't need to believe in Newton's laws of motion or Newton's laws of thermodynamics or any of those things. They require no belief. Belief is the booby prize. Because if you believe something without backing it up with knowledge, it doesn't do you any good. So the second kind of certainty, the first one in Arabic, they call it ilm al-yaqin, the certainty of reliable knowledge. The second one is called ayn al-yaqin. Ayn means eye. And it is the knowledge that you experience yourself. Go down to the damn beach and boil the water and check the temperature. That is the certainty that you get from doing the experiment yourself. You don't have to take anybody's word for it, and it's infinitely repeatable or it isn't. A lot of the knowledge here follows scientific method. Sufis invented scientific method, so we like it. And that states a few things. Any hypothesis has to be falsifiable. That means it ain't scientific if you can't prove that it's wrong. If there's no way to demonstrate that it's wrong, it's not science. So, is there a God? Is not a scientific question because we have no way to falsify that question. Does water boil at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level? Hell yes, we can falsify that question merely by just going down to sea level and boiling the water and seeing what happens.
And then,
once you know that it's falsifiable, the second is it repeatable? Can two people boil the water and come up with the same answer? If one comes up with 100 degrees Celsius and another one comes up with 150 degrees Celsius, something's wrong. So this is how you get knowledge without the need for belief. And in doing your due diligence, that's the kind of knowledge that you look for. Can anybody think of an example in the real world of something that they're doing that requires due diligence and you need some knowledge, where belief won't do?
I have a biology exam this week. And
Perfect.
I believe that I know about the respiratory system because I don't need to learn about the lungs and all the interactions in the blood.
yep.
Yeah, that's a good example. Now, the second one is harder. Action without identification. The classic example of this is found in the Bhagavad Gita. And I will remind you all of the story in brief, and hopefully the Hindu deities will forgive me for my glossing over so much important stuff. But basically, Arjun, who is this great warrior, is at the great battle. And on one side is his army, and the other side is the army of his enemies, who happen to also be his relatives. They're like his uncles, his cousins, his nephews. And he's going to have to go out and fight them. And he basically just collapses. He can't deal with it. Now, Krishna is Arjuna's charioteer. And this is where Krishna gives Arjuna this rap and teaches him about yoga. And basically says to him that no matter what you do or don't do, the outcome of this is going to be what it is. And, you know, he's basically saying, you know, I'm the avatar of God in this deal, and I've come here as death. Whether you act or withhold your actions, everybody's going to die. So get over yourself, and you need to get up and act, but do not be attached to the fruits of your action. This is incredibly hard for most people, but this is the true karma yoga, the practice of acting with no attachment to the outcome of your actions so that you don't acquire karma from it. So a student comes to me and says, I want to do this. And that's his action. And I say, no, you can't do that. They have a choice. They can get miffed. They can get angry. And if that's the case, they are lost in the identification with the outcome that they want. Or they can say, et voila, and just go on about their business. And I can tell you that this is the hardest thing to do, because we love our identification. We love the stories that we tell ourselves, and we love the stories that we tell ourselves about what we're going to do. And, you know, I have to admit, I was that student.
It's not entirely surprising.
What can I say? So, the law of due diligence allows you to practice this, which is one of the brilliant parts of it, is that you get plenty of practice of letting go of your identification with the outlook, with the outcome. You do it because you do it, and the outcome is what it is. And if the outcome is what you expected or what you wanted or not, either way, you're fine. You just continue on doing with what you're doing. Does this make sense?
It seems to me that this makes a lot of sense, but at the same time, you need some method of choosing which actions are plausible to get what you want, even if there's no guarantee.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the knowledge part.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge without belief will tell you what actions are likely to give you the outcome that you're looking for. The trick is to not be stuck in the identification. Who here has seen Despicable Me 3? Show of hands.
I still need to catch up. Sorry.
You haven't seen it yet?
I know.
Oh my God.
Fail.
I'm telling you. So there's this scene where the villain is stymied at something, and he throws a tantrum because the action that he was identified with, the outcome that he was identified with, didn't come out the way he wanted. And it was a perfect example of everybody's ego when this happens, whether they show it or not. I mean, I can remember a time or two, maybe a couple of times where the action that I wanted, the outcome that I wanted did not manifest. And I'm sitting on the outside looking very calm, perhaps even spiritual. And inside I'm going, ah, God damn it. But I wanted this.
Aaron says that's typical villain behavior, Mushtaq.
Yes, it is in fact typical villain behavior. And there's a profound truth in there somewhere. Now, the last bit up here, faith without object. This one is also very, very hard because usually we think that we should have faith in something. I am reminded of Granny Weatherwax. She says, I has faith. And the priest says, in which God? And she says, I don't have faith in gods. It only encourages them. I just has faith. That's all. That's kind of what faith without object is. Granny Weatherwax was perhaps one of the greatest manifestations of Buddhahood in the last century, in my humble opinion.
And she was from
the Discworld.
by
She was
Terry
one
Pratchett.
of the, by Terry Pratchett. She was one of the witches of Lankra. As a matter of fact, she was the head witch, though she would never admit it, not wanting to put on airs.
Yeah, well, she had first sight, which I guess is knowledge without belief.
Yep.
Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Nancy?
Oh, it's been a bit since I've read any of the books, but it was basically the ability to see what was right in front of you, and not miss the important details.
Yep. First sight and second thoughts. Yeah, that comes out of the Tiffany Aching series.
First sight, second thoughts.
Yeah.
Say more.
Second thoughts is where you question what you think about your immediate thoughts.
Mm. So the second reaction, as we talk about in Enneagram
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Pratchett was one of the rightly guided authors, in my opinion. Now, faith without object is an absolute necessity for due diligence. Because if you are practicing the law of due diligence, you need to have this faith. You need to have this sense of being within the flow of the universe. It's hard to describe. Noor, can you describe this?
Well, some of you may have read my blog post recently where I talked about the fact that sometimes I struggle with this, as we all do. And for me, putting it in the perspective of it not being so much about the faith in something. I mean, that's really what we're trying to avoid on some level. Rather, it's about understanding that we can cooperate with being in the flow of how things naturally move and unfold, or we can fight that. Having faith is figuring out how to enter into that flow through our actions of knowledge without belief and action without identifications. It's all kind of part of the same unfolding. And it's really not obligatory to think about it in terms of there being a supernatural being that you need to have faith in. It is very much more about trusting that things unfold for the good and learning how you can participate in that proactively.
And that last bit is important. learning how to participate in the flow of the universal, whatever it is, proactively.
And yeah, that's even how I described it as, sometimes we don't have a name for what that is. And that's okay. That's besides the point. We're just interacting with that because it is part of who we are and what we do, regardless of whether we're conscious of it or not. But the more that we consciously enter into that, the easier it is to manifest things in the way that we're talking about.
Yep. So, if you want to do real manifestation, I mean, serious stuff, manifesting millions of dollars, manifesting a great house, any of that, trust to the law of due diligence, not to the law of attraction. The ham sandwich will not fly into your mouth. But if you start the work, the universe will agree with you. Especially if you follow these three principles, which are the affirming, denying, and reconciling energies of the law of due diligence.
So which is what? Let's talk about that in a minute. With the
Okay, I should probably bring the image back up again. Okay. The knowledge without belief is the affirming force.
the proactive force.
Yes. Action without identification is the passive or denying force.
Let's unpack that a bit. Why is that?
Because you are literally saying no to identifying with the action.
Mm.
You are saying, this is not me. This is not part of me. And the reconciling force is faith without object, the universal flow of faith.
Well, they all have without, so could they all be denying?
Nope.
Okay.
I think it's more clarifying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is just how it is. It is manifesting the three energies, and you can take these and recombine them in 6 different ways, and it becomes very interesting when you do, because then you get the 6 laws working off the 3 forces. I think everybody here has gone through that little series of talks that we did on the 3 forces and the 6 laws.
Not everyone, but many.
Yeah, most of you. But let me encourage you to go back and think about how those laws are put together, and how, if you arrange these 3 along those six laws, what kind of manifestations you would get in the world. This is where it starts getting really deep. Esoteric even.
Spooky.
Yep. But it is in fact October. So we like spooky. Feel like it.
Oh my God.
Spooky.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the basic, digging down a little bit deeper into the no secret. Because this literally is no secret. This is out in the open for anybody to find if they would just look.
It could help a lot of people out too.
Yep.
Yeah. Any thoughts right now?
Yeah, I'm still not completely clear on your answer to Nancy's question. I mean, if I understood you correctly, you were saying that action without identification is the denying force because it denies identification.
Yeah,
right?
basically.
But
saying this is not
it
me.
seems like the same pattern holds true of the other 3 points also. So I'm trying to understand what the difference really is. I mean, on the belief side, you're knowing without, but denying anything is just a belief, right? So why is that not a denying force?
Because you're focusing on the knowing. You're not focusing on the belief.
Oh, but in the action part, aren't you focusing on the action?
You are focusing on withdrawing from the identification.
Okay. So it's a question of what it is that you're focusing on. Then.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in the faith without an object, you're focusing on the faith and not on
some object.
Okay.
I mean, I can see why that's confusing, Ilmar.
Yeah, I can too.
That's a legitimate thing to clarify. So thanks. And I think that's one of the one of the issues with trying to develop these things, with the language we have.
That's not a language issue. It's just a question of what's the criterion for being
it actually is a language issue, because when I think about it without having to put it in English, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
is that because you know it so damn well already, as opposed to those of us who don't?
Well, remember, this was originally spoken to me in Arabic.
Yeah.
And so Arabic has a whole different flavor to it. It is not an Indo-European language. It has a whole different approach. So this in Hebrew or Arabic or Aramaic would make a whole different kind of sense than it does in any of the Indo-Iranian languages. And the trouble with English as an Indo-Iranian language is that we like to explain things through negation.
Okay.
Not this, not
Right.
that. You know, the classic advaita, not two. So you negate the two. And that's what I had to do when I put this together to try and describe it, is to use a negation. But in other languages, you don't have to use a negation.
So how does it work in Arabic then? I mean, you're not negating in Arabic? What are you doing? You're simply pointing at something?
You're affirming rather than negating. And without having to go through a whole Arabic lesson, it would be very hard to do. And we only have like 15 minutes left, so I'm pretty sure I can't do that.
All right, I'll let you off the hook.
Yeah. But suffice to say that it makes more sense in, it even makes more sense in Farsi in some ways, but in Arabic specifically, it makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of limited to the vocabulary that we have, so we have to form these.
Yeah, Arabic is a language based on actions.
You know, I mean, that if you're looking for topics for discussion sometimes, I think that would be an interesting topic, because you're putting a lot of weight on how language functions. And of course, Worf and all that, we understand that there is an important role that language plays, but I guess I would be very curious as to, how that really works out between Indo-European and something like Arabic. I mean, what does it, I mean, I don't have a good feel for it. I'd love to have a better feel for what you get out of it. But
it's interesting because in Arabic, all words come from 3-letter verbs. So everything starts out as a verb, as an action.
Mm.
And then how you add prefixes and suffixes to that verb changes it into many, many different things, including nouns and adjectives and all of this sort of thing.
So in the Arab world, you primarily view upon the world as a series of processes as opposed to a set of things interacting?
Exactly.
Okay, good. That makes sense, because that appeals to me, that for various reasons.
That's one of the real beauties of Arabic, is that, and this is also true of Hebrew. This is true of the Semitic languages, is that they are process-based languages.
Okay.
And it gives you a very, very different view of the world. Chomsky be damned. There's a reason why we have a lot of conflict with our Arab neighbors, because we don't think in the same ways.
I mean, certainly the process view for me has been very valuable when I've tried to apply the things. I've done it independently of the language issue, but yeah. So that I would be very curious about that. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? David, ask me things.
Don't have anything at the moment.
Damn it.
Dance it out.
Well, I'm wondering whether the action without identification is similar to the Alexander technique of not end gaining, which
Probably. Yeah, I think that might be a good analogy.
I don't know, does anybody else need an explanation?
Probably everybody but me.
I would love
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
Omar knows Alexander technique, but that's a technique from the last generation. So
Yeah, more than that, it's a century or so old.
yeah,
Okay, the idea, as I understand it, is that if you only focus on what you're trying to do and not include a sense of your whole body in it, then you will get grabby at what you're doing and be inefficient. It's like if you were reaching for something, I don't know if this will show up on the video, but if you were reaching for something like this and raising your shoulder, that doesn't work as well as just extending, without raising your shoulder and just from the hips. That makes sense?
well, I understood you, but
Makes sense. I'm not quite sure how it applies to the process versus thingifying discussion we had earlier, but
I think that it applies in the idea of that what Alexander would want you to do is to experience the entire process of moving that limb and to not do the tension things. But we can't say it. I mean, it's like he struggled with the language of this too. He said, inhibit this movement, but it's not what we usually think of when we think of an inhibition.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is that if your mind is only on the object you want to get and nothing else, that's the identification, and that's when you get too forceful and grabby.
I call it being grasping. Like, that's how I personally experience it, as this inner sensation of being like almost possessive of the outcome, being hungry for it in a way that goes beyond just having a goal in mind and being more about the need to possess the outcome. And we're not talking about objects, we're talking about that identification that is almost visceral. And that can be toxic because it can distract you from the natural flow of things. Yeah, tunnel vision. Yeah.
Yeah, so that turns into a really good example.
Yeah. So yeah, you made me think of that, Nancy. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, and Aaron talks about he's the one who said tunnel vision, and he also says like an economy of action. Yeah, I mean, if you're spending a lot of energy craving the thing, I mean, there's something to be said about desire as a driving force. But when you're identifying with it, like if you're, how were we talking about this earlier, Mushtaq? We were talking about when it comes to being attached to the result, and if you don't get the right one, you're going to beat the hell out of yourself. And if you do get it, it's like, wow, I'm awesome. I'm the shit. I get stuff done, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of this. Any other thoughts? You better think of something, because otherwise you're going to get the commercial.
I have one more thought so I can fend off the commercial.
Go for it.
Okay.
Which is, my first thought when I saw the phrase knowledge without belief was that it would be more like, you know, you live at sea level, you have the experience of cooking with boiling water, and it's successful. Now, if somebody tells you, I don't know, I get the bubbles and the water never really gets hot, you know, are you going to say that they're hallucinating or stupid? Or, you know, can you eventually figure out that they're up in the mountains?
Yeah, and that's very, it's a very important distinction. I grew up above 6,000 feet. My home was 7,350 feet above sea level when I was a kid. And so we could boil water and make tea and drink it right away. The first time I did that when we moved to California, I burned the shit out of my mouth.
God, that's what I was afraid I was going to hear. Ouch.
Yeah, it was a revelation. I sipped it and it was like, I literally spewed the tea out of my mouth. It was so hot.
Ouch.
And I was, you know, so science became very important in that moment. It's like, why did that happen?
Well, it's also a clue to me that maybe I can make tea at lower temperatures and not have to wait for it to cool.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's worth an experiment, Nancy. I'd be curious. Sounds kind of fun.
Any other thoughts? Questions, answers? Go for it, Elmar.
Well, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's just, I mean, even the experiment is laden with theory, which, I mean, I'm remembering my experiment doing the milk and oil drop experiment, right? Here I was in the physics lab, right? And we're watching this, you know, we're presumably measuring the force of this single electron, you know, because it's attached to this oil drop. But I mean, just to even interpret that as showing that, there's a whole bunch of theory that at that point I had to basically accept from my physics prof in this case, so from a reliable source, but still there's a lot of, so I guess what I'm saying is I'm not sure there's that clean distinction between belief and knowledge always.
Well, if you're talking scientifically, this is why in science you don't have truth. You don't have laws in science. You have theories.
Right.
The only place where you can get a proof is mathematics.
Right. Right.
Within the sciences. Scientific method does not give you proofs. It gives you theories. And those theories will forever be theories because they can technically be falsified.
Right. Right.
But with some of them, they have been tested so many times, and this is how a hypothesis becomes a theory, is they've been tested so many times that we have no doubt that the outcome will always be this. But you have to leave that door to doubt open. So it's like the theory of evolution. Yeah, the Christians get all upset because we say the theory thing. It's just a theory. No, it's not a theory. It is fact, as close to fact as we can get it. We can see evolution in action in short-lived creatures, like insects, for instance. We can actually watch evolution happen. There is no doubt that evolution through the process of natural selection is the best model to describe what goes on that we have at this time. But there is always that door open to proving that some part of that theory is incorrect, in which case you have to go back and rewrite it. And that requires, that is where belief does not enter in. If you believed, and this unfortunately happens in science all too often, if you believe that something is true, then you stop being willing to have the theorem falsified.
Which, of course, is the value of a community then, because essentially in a scientific community, you have the dialogue, between.
Ideally, yeah.
I was going to say, ideally, you do. Yeah.
But I mean, that's one of the really important functions that happens, and that keeps that process at least semi-clean.
Mhm.
No matter how firmly I'm attached to my particular hypothesis, I mean, Mushtaf is going to come along and say, you're full of bullshit. Here's an experiment. I'll show you you're wrong about that. And that's extremely valuable, and I imagine that something similar goes on in your Sufi circles, I would imagine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, the Sufis invented scientific method. This was scientific method as it's practiced now came out of the Arab sciences of the Arabic Golden Age, the Muslim Golden Age. And admittedly, we stole a few things from the Greeks here and there, but we cobbled together scientific method as it exists now pretty clearly in the 1100s.
So Karl Popper was basically just channeling Sufis?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. Aaron says, as a student of history, it is rather frustrating when data is presented as fact.
Yep.
Yeah. And I just want to add that this is all part of due diligence, is you do the best you can with the data you have, and then you respond as things unfold.
Yeah, and you have faith, which includes the faith that if something is wrong, somebody will falsify it.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I don't know if any of you have watched, but Netflix has this interesting 3-part series on the brain of Bill Gates, or inside the brain of Bill Gates.
I have seen it advertised. I have not watched it because...
It's worth watching because, I mean, the guy has an incredible persistence on some of his projects, and yet is very much into doing his due diligence about it, and getting all the smartest people to know something about that project, whether it's immunization for polio or, or toilets or whatever he's working on, it's just, I would rather enjoyed that series. I recommend it,
I'll check it out. Yeah, Aaron has made a comment here that we need to do.
Aaron says, in reference to the frustration of data being presented as fact, he says, "It's why I have a salt shaker handy when I study."
Mhm.
Yeah, which is an important tool for science.
Yeah.
Says more.
Mustaqim says, with limited time, resources, or energy, the challenge is to choose which problem in life to apply the process. For example, one may have a work problem at the same time they have money or health or relationship problems.
Yep. And there's two ways to deal with that. You can pick what you consider the most important problem, or you can look for the meta problem that encompasses all 4 of those or all 5 of those.
Or the underlying, whatever.
Yep. And sometimes looking for the meta problem is the most useful way to handle that sort of thing.
How would you define a meta problem, real quick?
A problem that if you were to solve it, would solve all of the ones beneath it.
Mm-hmm. So something more core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, money, health, relationships. Money has to do with work, for instance. So work and money, kind of the same thing. You have body, mind, and spirit stuff right there. Relationships would be the heart, the emotions. Health is, of course, your body, and money would be your mind. And so you can go, how can I integrate body, mind, and spirit? And through that integration, you could solve all 3 of those areas.
How does that feel as an answer, Mr. Key? Good?
Yeah, and remember, do feel free to falsify that answer, because
Yeah.
it is possible that I could be full of shit. This has happened once or twice in my life. I hate to admit it, but it's true.
Are you making a collection of those?
Mental list.
Yeah.
Yep. Not a very long list. He's pretty good at owning when things don't fit what he originally thought.
And are you pretty good at pointing it out?
What do you think?
She is. It's one reason I keep her around. She keeps me honest. And she's one of the people who is not afraid to call me out on my shit, which is
Yeah.
another reason I keep her around.
Yep. He definitely calls me out on my shit. Yeah. But we each try to do it in ways that are receivable.
And kind.
Yeah.
And that was one of the hardest things to get her to the point of being able to do, because of the whole teacher-student relationship back when she was a mere student, to get her to realize that the teacher is not on a pedestal, is
Yep.
not above her, is capable of making mistakes. Of course, she's kind of embraced that now.
And then that's very much part of taking responsibility for your own life, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's my responsibility if I know something is not quite right to do something about it, at least to the best of my ability. And that includes letting him know when I think something is inaccurate or I don't want to say not appropriate, but just not a good fit for the situation.
Yeah. And that's incredibly valuable to me, because if we had a vertical relationship where I was the great guru and she was the lowly disciple, she wouldn't be able to tell me these things.
No.
And this goes back to my talking about horizontal versus vertical relationships within the work.
and
Also a great talk.
do you have that kind of relationship with your teachers?
Yes.
Or is that more traditionally hierarchical one?
No, with the teachers who are really my teachers, I have that sort of relationship. And it was one that, that's how I really learned this, because they valued me being able to give them feedback. So that is a tradition within our tarika. This is something that we have known for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And the other guys can go out and kiss the hands of the master and all of that kind of stuff. We don't do that shit.
But that's not generally true of Sufi orders, is it? Or is it just true of your particular?
It's true of our particular order. It's true of some others, and it's not true of still others.
There's an array. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometime I'm going to have to do a talk on the different kinds of Sufis out there. And I will do that talk when I know that I can hide for a year afterwards.
Sticky is clapping. He wants that. Yes.
Yeah, I have several classifications of Sufis. I think the only one I've mentioned is museum Sufis.
Yeah. There are several of those here in LA.
Yep.
I've encountered them personally, and I was able to be involved in their community in like a peripheral sort of way, but I knew that it would not suit me in my my own path and my own proclivities. So
You're just
yeah.
too wild for them.
Kind of. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
You want to give us an example of one of those, or at least the definition of museum Sufi?
The museum Sufis are the ones who try and dress and act like it is, say, 19th century Turkey or 16th century Anatolia or 10th century Baghdad. And,
I think there can be a place for that, but that's not the normal state. Like, it's so hard to be part of the actual cultural environment when you stand out in that way.
Yep. Yeah, you kind of ostracize yourself in a certain way, and that goes against one of the essential tenets of Sufism, which is be part of the community. You know, don't be special. So
put on airs.
Don't go around with a. I mean, in America, we have a Sufi garb that we wear. And it's mostly t-shirts and blue jeans. This is my Sufi uniform. Baseball cap in the summer and wool knit watch cap in the winter. But this is not to say that I don't have a full-on Sufi regalia for ceremonial purposes, which includes, you know, a cap and turban and a khirka, which is the long robe, and, you know, the baggy pants and the whole 9 yards. I got one of those. Haven't worn it in years because most of the time that is not appropriate. So within our branch of this tariqa, t-shirts and blue jeans or t-shirts and tights in the summer, and sweatshirts and blue jeans in the winter.
I'd love to see him in your tights.
Well, I think he means the leggings that I
figured.
yeah.
But
I have a pair of bicycle tights.
All right.
No.
Yeah, I look very fetching in them.
I mean, do you ever want to comment on specific Sufi teachers like Helminsky and like that?
I don't usually comment on specific teachers. I might if I have met them. I've met Kabir several times. Nice guy. I like him. Decent human being. That's pretty much what I have to say. That's how I tend to break things down. Is he a nice guy? Does he treat people around him well? You know, if yes, then I like him. If no, then I don't have anything to do with him.
Yep.
And there were a few. There was one big sheikh, had huge turban, boom. And he told his followers that when their wives were pregnant, they should not ever be allowed to have an ultrasound because it would affect the development of the baby. That guy, I have nothing good to say about, just for that. Because that is an incredibly stupid statement, and he has no business saying things like that because he has no background to say it. Grr.
Grr. Aaron's asking if it was a Suleiman-sized turban.
It was damn near. Yeah, I try not to speak ill of anybody, except maybe Donald Trump.
I guess it's open season on Donald Trump, but I feel the same way. Like it's important not to speak ill in that way about fellow Sufis.
Yep, and I can tell you who the nice guys are. It's like Kabir, really nice guy. Pir Zia, who is the head of the Sufi Order International, the grandson of Inayat Khan, hell of a nice guy. Has a really sweet presence. It's nice to hang around with him. I like him. Trying to think of other Sufis. I'm sure they'll come to me. There's a lot of nice Sufis out there.
The guy up in your neck of the woods, isn't Almas?
He's not part of a tariqa as far as I know, but I think the world of him. I make Noor read all of his books.
I enjoyed them.
Yeah.
I got a lot out of them.
Yeah. So when you want Sufi psychology, he's the guy to go to. And as far as I know, he doesn't wear funny clothes.
Yeah. And we do get facetious sometimes. Like the whole Lady Noor thing is completely to be playful rather than putting on airs per se.
Yep. As one of my teachers said, if you won't laugh at yourself, who will?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's only half facetious because I also want her to get the sense that she's actually an important part.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's something to be said about it psychologically for me, is that it's not about being in authority per se, but trusting the knowledge, the authoritativeness of my knowledge. Let's put it that way.
And that trust that presumably you've developed by now, Kyle, comes from your direct experience or the trust you have in your teacher line? Or both, I guess, is probably most likely.
When we talk about trust, do you mean in my knowledge, in faith? I just want to make sure that I understand what you're asking.
Well, I assume you feel like you know some things on, roughly speaking, the Sufi path, right?
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm wondering is, what portion of that is a result of your own direct experience, presumably under the guidance of Mustafa and the other, and what of it, part of it is that initial type of knowledge that Mustafa talked about, which is, deliverance from an authoritative source.
I'd say there's a certain amount of book learning type knowledge that is the more like trusting in an authoritative source. Mm-hmm. But we have to acknowledge that I've been doing this work both formally and formally for over a decade now. Mm-hmm. And so even though I wasn't officially initiated and all that stuff until several years into my process, the fact is that I have a lot of experiential knowledge that I built up in that time. And given that there were lessons that I learned the hard way, the easy way, the middle way, all those things, I feel like at this point I definitely have experiential insights that I can depend on and test out and then share with other people and see how those impact them. And in a lot of ways, I've earned the trust of people I know because I've given them advice that worked for them, that emerged from my personal experience.
Gotcha.
Yeah. On the Sufi path, book learning will only take you to the door. Book learning may even knock on the door for you, but the actual doing is the path.
Yeah. And you learn just as much from, sometimes in retrospect, right, you learn from your mistakes as well as your successes. And at times you're like, what am I doing wrong? But as you go along and you look back, that's a really great time to learn from mistakes made.
And that's probably also a good time to become grateful for those incremental learnings that you've actually.
Absolutely, yes.
That's something that I sometimes miss doing myself, and when I start doing that consciously, it definitely helps,
Yeah, definitely. Because that's part of what we're talking about, right? Like the diligence part is experiencing personally, it's seeking knowledge from others. The faith is trusting that you're going in the right direction, that things are, even if they're difficult, they're moving forward in a progressive kind of way where knowledge is building upon itself, experience is building upon itself. And then you're right, gratitude comes into play where you are thankful for how far you've come and you are witness to that, witness to your own process and to all the contributions that have been made from the outside into your process.
And it also provides, at least in my experience, a sort of a completion to that cycle.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
where it can then spiral to another, another
Yep.
echo, but it does provide a sense of completion.
Yeah, I mean,
Otherwise, I find myself spinning and trying to redo it again and again.
Yeah. Mishtak calls it like, okay, you have a whole new fun set of problems now. Yeah. So it's a real thing. And sometimes it's hard to see it until you're down the road.
Mm.
But again, I do think that's where gratitude comes in because it makes it easier to savor the process as well as the results of the process.
Mishtak, that's one of the things that I really appreciate from that initial talk on this and also now, because I haven't really kind of, I think, given enough weight to that, the importance of gratitude actually.
Yeah, gratitude is the glue that holds the entire process together.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds a little bit new agey, but the new agers don't deserve it. That's what I gotta say.
When you say it's the
Gratitude
glue,
is serious business.
when you say it's the glue, can you expand on that? In what sense is it the glue that holds it together?
Because that sense of gratitude connects you with the entire process, and it keeps the process going even when things get hard.
Mm.
It keeps you on the wheel.
Yep.
On the treadmill.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we should probably wrap this up. David, you look so serious there. You just popped onto the screen for a second. So quick commercial. It is a new month and we have put out our call for alms. Alms for the poor. This is zombie alms today, since it's Halloween. So we're all just staggering around going
Brains, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's always voluntary, but it is always appreciated to have donations. So
yeah, and it's what helps us keep going because schools can be expensive.
Yeah, and we do love doing this, but it's also not without its costs, and we do our best to defray them through sessions and through willing donations as well.
Yeah.
So.
And my social security check.
So what's our raffle this month?
This month, you have a chance to win your very own 9-sided circle t-shirt with the Enneagram, with the Escher triangle and the B in the center. And well, you can choose the color. There's lots of colors. I recommend black because black is the official color because everything goes with black. But if you win, you get it in your size and in the color of your choice. And we will mail it to anywhere in the world. And there will also undoubtedly be special gifts and the secret talk with Lady Noor will be on the types of intelligence that a person can develop. This basically, Mustaqim started this thought, and then Noor and I talked about it somewhat. Did she disappear? She disappeared. Hopefully she'll come back. There you are.
Got booted. What was
Yeah.
the last thing? What did I miss?
I was just taking your name in vain.
How dare
I was
you?
saying that Mustaqim got me thinking about the kinds of intelligence, and there is an Enneagram of the kinds of human intelligence.
Mm.
And we are going to go through that Enneagram, you and I, on your secret talk so that you can learn about it.
All right,
It's going
then.
to be me teaching her. Only she will probably teach me a thing or two. because she always does. And everybody who donates will get a link to that. And the September secret talk will be delivered to y'all within probably a week.
Yep.
And that's going to be fun too. The Enneagram of Lucid Dreaming.
Yeah, fun stuff. Learning that lately.
Yep.
Personal project.
So we have other projects in the works. We're trying out new things to see how they work. And there is still the Enneagram class that I talked about either last time or the time before that we are going to do that will be the a deeper look at the Enneagram of process. It'll be somewhat like the one that I did with Steve Barnes, but it will cover different material because I want to drill down into the process of how to use the Enneagram of process in your life. Mr. Gurdjieff said the Enneagram is the universal hieroglyphic, that if you understand it, it can teach you all things. So we are going to work on understanding it so you can be taught all things. And it will be free. I will probably only take 10 people. And the deal is that you show up for the class.
Every week.
Every week, because we are recording this and it will become a project for sale. And you guys won't have to pay for it because you are our faithful students anyway. And so I don't want to charge you for it. Kyle doesn't want to charge you for it. But we could use your help in developing it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you have an emergency, that's one thing, we'll talk about it. But the idea is that we want to produce this with your participation.
Yeah, as an interactive class, because I don't know about you guys, but I get a hell of a lot more out of this when it's us having a conversation rather than just me front loading you information.
And one of the
that's a great example because we were able to drill down deeper into concepts that would not have gotten drilled down deeper into if people didn't ask questions.
Exactly, and that's always the case. But in our original program, which I wasn't facilitating, but I participated in, the only way we could really interact was through the chat box, and that has its limitations, obviously. So we think we can do things differently this time for the better.
Yep. So drop me notes or drop Noor notes. Either one will do. If you want to be part of this. And I would love to have everybody here as part of this class. And once we figure out who's going to be in it, we will work out what day it will be on and see if we can make it suitable for everybody.
Yep. Because Saturday evenings might work. We'll see. We'll do.
Yeah, could be Friday evening. Could be Wednesday evening. Could be any evening.
All right. Anything else?
No. Well, then I'm going to stop the recording and say thank you all very much for coming and participating. And it was great fun having you. And we will see you hopefully all next week.